What if the most dangerous idea in modern science is not a theory about black holes or quantum particles, but a quiet assumption so deeply embedded in our culture that almost nobody stops to question it? What if the story you have been told your entire life, that you are a random accident in a cold and meaningless universe, is not just philosophically wrong but mathematically impossible? I am a physicist and a mathematician. I have spent my entire career tracing the pure geometry of space and time. And what I am about to show you does not come from religion or sentiment. It comes from the hardest, most unforgiving logic that science possesses. Stay with me, because by the end of this, the universe will never look accidental to you again. Look around you right now. For decades, a particular version of science has been selling you a specific story. It goes like this. Everything began with a chaotic explosion, a random spark in the darkness, and through pure blind luck, that spark eventually produced galaxies, stars, planets, and finally you, sitting there, listening to these words. That story is not bold scientific thinking. It is intellectually lazy mythology dressed in the language of physics. And I am going to dismantle it piece by piece using nothing but mathematics and the actual laws of nature. Let us begin with the most fundamental question of all. What is the probability that our universe, precisely calibrated to support matter, stars, and conscious minds, was born from pure chance? The answer is a number so grotesque that it barely fits inside human imagination. It is 1 divided by 10 raised to the power of 10 raised to the power of 123. If you tried to write out all the zeros in that denominator, you would run out of atoms in the entire observable universe before you finished. That is not a small probability. That is not an unlikely outcome. That is a mathematical impossibility dressed up as cosmic accident. And anyone telling you otherwise is either ignorant of the numbers or hoping you are. To understand why that figure is so crushing, you need to understand one of the most absolute and unbreakable rules in all of physics, the second law of thermodynamics. You already know this law intuitively, even if you have never heard its name. Drop a glass on the floor and it shatters into 100 pieces. You have never once seen those pieces leap back up, reassemble themselves, and return to your hand perfectly intact. That never happens, not because it is unlikely, but because the entire universe is governed by a law that drives all systems from order toward disorder. Physicists call this measure of disorder entropy, and entropy always increases. Always, without a single exception in the entire recorded history of science. The universe is like an enormous wound-up clock, slowly unwinding toward total chaos. Any physical system left to itself never spontaneously becomes more organized, more complex, or more structured. It degrades, it disperses, it dissolves. Now apply strict logical reasoning to that fact. If the universe is becoming more disordered today, then yesterday it was more ordered. 1,000,000 years ago, it was more organized still. And if you wind the cosmic clock all the way back to the very first instant of creation, you arrive at a physical reality that makes the most committed materialist break into a cold sweat. A truly random explosion would have produced maximum entropy, a formless boiling soup of radiation, or far more likely an immediate gravitational collapse into an enormous black hole. Because mathematically, there are trillions upon trillions of ways to build a dead and chaotic universe, and only an infinitesimally small fraction of configurations that produce an ordered one. And yet here we are, in a cosmos that began in a state of order so exquisitely precise that it defies every expectation blind chance could ever produce. To feel the true scale of that precision, picture yourself holding a dart. I am asking you to throw it and hit the exact center of a target. But this target is not on a wall in front of you. It sits on the far side of the observable universe, billions of light years away, and the bullseye you must strike is the size of a single subatomic particle. Throwing that dart blindfolded and hitting the mark by pure accident is astronomically more probable than our universe being born in its observed state of low entropy through random chance. This is not philosophy. This is geometry. This is the measurement of what physicists call phase space, the full range of all possible configurations the cosmos could have taken at its origin. The ordered configuration we actually inhabit occupies a volume within that phase space so ridiculously small that the word tiny does not begin to describe it. The origin of our universe was not a messy accident. It was a precisely tuned, perfectly orchestrated release of space and time, structured from the very first instant to permit the existence of matter and, eventually, minds capable of understanding it. The universe began with a clock that some fundamental intelligence had to win first. And that conclusion brings us immediately to a deeper and far more disturbing problem. If the universe began in a state of absolute mathematical perfection, who or what defined those mathematical rules before matter itself existed? Here is where mainstream science tells you its second-grade lie. You are often told that mathematics is simply a human invention, a practical tool our species developed to count livestock, measure land, and build bridges. That claim is one of the most arrogant and poorly examined assumptions of our era. I have devoted my professional life to advanced mathematics, to topology, and to general relativity, working at the outermost boundary of human knowledge. And I can tell you with complete confidence from that position, we did not invent mathematics. We discovered it. Consider an infinite mathematical structure like the fractal geometries I work with alongside colleagues. When we explore those forms, we are not generating them freshly inside our brains. We are mapping a territory that already existed, a permanent and absolute continent composed not of physical atoms but of pure conceptual truth. The number pi did not come into existence when the first mathematician calculated it. The prime numbers did not appear because humans needed them. The rules of hyperbolic symmetry would hold precisely as they do now, even if every human being and every physical object in the universe were erased tomorrow. These truths exist in a realm entirely independent of matter. Now connect that fact to the physical world, because this is where the logic becomes truly overwhelming. The laws of physics, from the way space-time curves around a black hole to the behavior of vibrating quantum particles, obey these mathematical laws with a precision that defeats every casual explanation. But stop and genuinely think about that. An electron has no brain. A galaxy has no hidden quantum computer running calculations about how it should move. How does a piece of blind, unconscious, dead matter know that it must obey extraordinarily sophisticated mathematical equations in every fraction of every second? Matter does not author the laws. Matter is enslaved by them. And if mathematical laws dictate with absolute authority how the entire cosmos must behave, then the conceptual world is both superior to and older than the physical world. Ideas existed before things did. Throughout my career, I have repeatedly solved equations about the structure of space and time and found geometric patterns that nobody anticipated. Years later, astronomers point their telescopes at regions billions of light years away and discover that the actual universe obeys precisely those same patterns I calculated on paper. If the cosmos were a blind accident, the matter composing it would have no obligation to follow the logic of rational minds. Light would change its properties on alternate Tuesdays. Gravity would behave differently in the Andromeda galaxy. Instead, what we observe everywhere we look is absolute fidelity, an unbreakable loyalty of physical reality toward mathematics of breathtaking elegance. Science does not refute a creator. Science is only possible because the universe was built with rational order. If the foundation of reality were a stupid and chaotic soup, scientific investigation would be pointless. The fact that it works, the fact that equations written on paper correctly predict the behavior of matter billions of light years away, is itself evidence of a structure and intentional design. Laws and mathematical ideas do not hover in space unaided. They require a mind to sustain them. The universe does not resemble a cold and soulless machine nearly as much as it resembles a vast mathematical thought, and a thought requires a thinker. But do not get comfortable yet. Because if the universe is a thought sustained by an infinite mind and everything within it is governed by eternal mathematical laws, we crash at full speed into the most brutal mystery of all existence. A mystery that shatters the assumptions of biologists and physicists alike. That mystery is you. Here is where the arrogance of modern materialism collapses completely. You are told constantly that your brain is nothing more than a flesh machine, a very complex and rather wet biological computer. Your thoughts, emotions, sense of self, and capacity to understand the cosmos are described as nothing but chemical and electrical signals bouncing between neurons. Everything is computation, they insist, everything is reducible to mechanism. That is the greatest lie of our century, and I will prove it using the hardest and most unforgiving mathematical logic available. If your brain were simply a computer, it would operate under a strict set of algorithmic rules. Inputs, processing, outputs, causes and effects that are purely mechanical in nature. But nearly a century ago, a mathematical genius demonstrated something that destroyed this idea permanently. The incompleteness theorem establishes in an irrefutable way that within any logical and consistent mathematical system, there will always be truths that are absolutely real, but that the system itself can never prove using its own internal rules. A computer confronting one of these truths cannot step outside its own program. It gets stuck. It loops endlessly. It cannot understand what it cannot compute. But you can, I can. The human mind can look at that same mathematical paradox, step outside the system, apply conscious awareness, and recognize that something is true even when mechanical rules cannot confirm it. We understand. Machines only calculate. Genuine comprehension requires something that no blind algorithm possesses: subjective consciousness. And here is the paradox that paralyzes conventional science and exposes its deepest blind spot. If we are constructed exclusively from ordinary atoms following mechanical and computable rules, how is it physically possible that we produce thoughts that are neither mechanical nor computable? How can predictable and lifeless matter generate a free mind that perceives absolute truth? The answer offered by materialist atheism is to shrug, label consciousness an illusion, and promise that larger computers will eventually explain it. That is an intellectually pathetic response to the most important question in science. The truth, which I have investigated for decades at the frontier between quantum physics and brain structure, is that consciousness is not a biological accident. It is not a vapor rising from a meat machine. Human understanding reaches truths that exist beyond space and time. And for that to be possible, the mind must have direct access to that eternal conceptual world that governs physical reality. If the universe was conceived by a fundamental mathematical intelligence, as we have already demonstrated through the argument from entropy, then your consciousness is not a blind byproduct of evolutionary mud. Your consciousness is a reflection, an antenna precisely tuned to that primordial creative intelligence. A cosmos without conscious observers is a dead cosmos. It is a geometrically perfect performance with a stage calibrated to the millimeter and not a single audience member present to give it meaning. The physics reveals that within the deepest structures of your biology, at the quantum level, processes occur that link your mind directly to the fundamental architecture of reality. You are not a passive spectator. You are a structural requirement. The fact that you can question your own existence, that you can suffer and love and comprehend the equations that govern the cosmos, means you are rooted in the original intention of the Creator. You are the universe understanding itself. But this pushes us toward a genuinely terrifying conclusion. If your mind is connected to the original design and physics forces us to admit that we are more than molecular machines, then the boundary between the physical world and something beyond it dissolves entirely. And that means we must confront an even stranger fact, one that will break your intuitions completely. I am warning you now that this is the section where most scientists look away. You believe you understand time. You believe the past has vanished, that the present is the only reality, and that the future has not yet been written. That belief is a persistent and thoroughly false biological illusion. Einstein's theory of relativity, a mathematical domain I have worked in and extended throughout my entire career, demonstrates without any remaining doubt that space and time are fused into a single rigid four-dimensional structure. Physicists call this the block universe, or the space-time block. Within that vast geometric construction, the moment the first oceans form on Earth, the moment you are hearing these words right now, and the exact day our sun eventually becomes a white dwarf, all exist simultaneously. Everything is there, static, perfect, and unchanging when viewed from a sufficiently elevated perspective. Now take that immense cosmological revelation and collide it directly with the strangeness of quantum mechanics, because this is precisely where the mathematical paradox emerges that breaks the mind of anyone attempting to defend the universe without a creator. At the quantum level, before anything is measured or observed, it has no definite physical state. A particle exists in a haze of overlapping probabilities simultaneously. This is called superposition. Only when a deep interaction occurs, when an observation takes place, when something collapses the geometric fog of possibilities, does that particle finally settle into a concrete location in our universe. Pure physical matter requires something to collapse that mathematical cloud of probabilities before it can become real and tangible. Now apply the same strict logic. In the very first instant of the universe, before stars, before planets, before any biologist in a laboratory coat, the entire cosmos existed as one massive quantum state, an infinite superposition of overlapping possibilities. If there were no observers, no measuring instruments, nothing whatsoever capable of collapsing a wave function, who or what forced that incomprehensible mathematical soup of infinite possibilities to crystallize into precisely this cosmos with its absurdly low and perfectly calibrated entropy? Materialist physicists hide behind unverifiable theories like the multiverse. They propose that infinitely many invisible universes are constantly branching into existence and that we simply happen to inhabit the lucky one. That is the most unscientific, cowardly, and desperate argument I have encountered in my entire career. It invents infinite unobservable ghosts solely to avoid acknowledging the only logically consistent answer available. Collapsing that initial quantum state required an anchor. It required an observation or a foundational act of will from outside time itself, because physical time was only just beginning to exist in that very same event. If you are feeling genuine intellectual vertigo right now, it is because you are seeing the geometry of reality without the filters that comfortable science normally places over your eyes. The creative intelligence responsible, that supreme mathematical mind, is not a humanoid figure seated on a cloud inside our cosmic clockwork. It does not wait to observe your decisions tomorrow. For that mind, the entire block of space-time is a single thought, conceived, sustained, and completed in one eternal and absolute present. And your conscious mind, which we have already demonstrated, is not a computer, interacts at the quantum level with that same foundational layer of reality. The central error of modern atheism is to examine the perfectly turning gears of the material universe and conclude pathetically that there is no clockmaker, simply because the clockmaker's hands cannot be found physically lodged between the wheels. But I am a mathematician. I analyze the precise weight and calibration of those gears. And the pure physics demonstrates unambiguously that gears of this precision do not assemble themselves from nothing. Existence is a continuous act of intention. But before you exhale with relief, imagining that this means the universe is a warm and comfortable place designed exclusively around your happiness, we must confront the hardest physical truth of all about our own temporal ending. This is something very few people can bear to hear directly. We have established that the creative intelligence sustains the entire block of space-time as a single thought. But do not use that as an excuse for cheap emotional comfort, because now we must look unflinchingly at the physical destiny of our reality. I have demonstrated that the universe began in a state of perfect order, a low entropy configuration shaped by a master intelligence. But the second law of thermodynamics stops for no one. The cosmic clock continues its advance toward chaos, and you need to understand precisely what that means for the matter from which you are constructed. Within billions of years, the last star in the universe will exhaust its nuclear fuel and go dark. The entire cosmos will sink into absolute frozen blackness. Galaxies will crumble. Everything once solid will be consumed by enormous black holes. Modern materialism presents this as definitive proof of a meaningless universe, a cosmic cemetery where every human hope and discovery is eventually buried under crushing gravitational weight. But I have gone further than that conclusion. I have calculated the ultimate fate of those black holes themselves, and they are not eternal. Over trillions upon trillions of years, they will slowly evaporate, bleeding their energy into the void until the very last one vanishes in a faint burst of radiation. What remains after that? An unimaginably vast universe, completely cold and totally empty. No atoms, no solid matter, only massless particles like photons of light, traveling through an infinite void for an eternity. And here is where general relativity discloses its deepest and most unsettling secret. In physics, if you possess no mass, you experience neither time nor distance. For a photon crossing the entire observable universe, the journey takes exactly 0 seconds from its own perspective. It registers no passage of time and no traversal of space. In that distant dead future, when the entire universe consists solely of massless light, the cosmos will literally forget how to measure time and space. It will lose all sense of scale entirely. And in the mathematics of pure geometry, an infinitely large universe that cannot measure its own size becomes mathematically and physically identical to an infinitely small and infinitely hot point. The abyss of absolute emptiness and the seed of a new creation are the same thing. The absolute end of this universe is the precise and necessary condition for a new Big Bang. This is the hard truth that reduces materialists to despair but reveals the supreme perfection of the Creator's design. Your physical body, your civilization, and this entire material universe are engineered to be temporary. They are transient by mathematical necessity. If you anchor your entire sense of meaning in matter alone, the physics guarantees your eventual and total devastation, because matter will be completely annihilated. But we have already established that you are not only matter. We have demonstrated that consciousness is a direct connection to the eternal mathematics governing reality, to the mind of God itself. The fundamental intelligence that calibrated the laws of physics with such crushing precision does not depend on atoms to exist. When the physical universe dissolves into a sea of timeless light, the mathematical rules, the pure eternal concepts, and the foundational consciousness will remain entirely intact. They were never born, and they will never die. The harsh truth is not that the universe ends. The harsh truth is that this material universe is only a temporary stage, a theater of sand built with a specific purpose, which will then be swept away by the cosmic wind when the performance is complete. The Creator does not fail when the universe dies. The Creator is completing a circular equation of such absolute mathematical beauty that the human mind can barely sustain the sight of it. If the physical conclusion of everything is simply the return to that eternal thought, then our temporary existence here carries an enormous weight of significance. And this drives us inevitably toward the final climax of this entire argument. If we are conscious antennas tuned to the Creator's mind, temporarily housed in a universe destined to dissolve, what exactly are we supposed to do with this consciousness while the clock keeps moving? Consider the immensity of the cosmos surrounding you right now. Invisible dark matter, supermassive black holes tearing the fabric of space, quasars burning with the energy of 1 trillion suns across distances that shatter comprehension. The voices of scientific atheism will tell you that all of it exists for no fundamental reason, and that your presence is an insignificant biological accident in a forgotten corner of an ordinary galaxy. I assert that this view is mathematically ignorant. The deepest physics shows that reality is not complete without an observer. Matter at the quantum level does not decide what it is until it is observed. Your brain is not a blind mechanical calculator. Within the neurons of your mind, inside tiny and elegant cylindrical structures called microtubules, processes occur that conventional science is genuinely afraid to acknowledge. At that microscopic scale, the boundary between physical matter and the quantum world blurs completely. Your brain is capable of sustaining quantum states of superposition and collapsing them through the pure geometry of space-time. Your mind functions literally as a quantum anchor. You are taking a universe of infinite mathematical probabilities and forcing it to become a concrete, conscious, and experienced physical reality in every fraction of every second of your existence. That means you are not an accidental spectator. You are an absolute structural necessity. A perfect universe governed by laws of overwhelming beauty but containing not a single mind capable of experiencing it is identical to a brilliant mathematical theorem written on paper that nobody has ever read. It is inert, sterile, and devoid of genuine meaning. The creative intelligence that calibrated the initial entropy of creation with a staggering precision did not build this immense cosmic theater to leave the seats permanently empty. It shaped physical laws, the chemistry of carbon, the rules of quantum gravity, precisely so that you could open your eyes. You are the internal mechanism the cosmos uses to understand itself. We are the vital bridge between finite matter condemned to dissolution and the eternal mathematical mind of God that will never disappear.